At 77, I learned that a man can disappear while standing in plain daylight. It happened at a bus stop with a cracked plastic bench, a timetable faded by sun, and a little square of pavement I had stood on for almost 9 years. I was not sleeping in an alley. I was not lost. I was not shouting at strangers. I was wearing my brown coat, holding my cane in one hand and my clinic appointment card in the other, waiting for the number 14 like I had done every Tuesday since my wife died. The bus came around the corner at 8:11. I lifted my hand. The driver looked straight ahead and kept going. That was the first warning. The second warning came days later, after I filed a complaint and was told, in a voice polished smooth by office training, that I had been recorded as an aggressive passenger. Not upset, not frustrated, not elderly man missed by bus. Aggressive. One word changed everything. Drivers began slowing down before my stop, then rolling past as if I were a pothole. A neighbor stopped offering me a lift because she had heard there was trouble. My daughter, Grace, started saying maybe I should not be traveling alone anymore. And I did the one thing no old man wants to admit. I began to wonder whether they were right. Maybe I had waved too sharply. Maybe my voice at the depot had been louder than I remembered. Maybe age had made my face look angry even when I was only afraid, but the truth did not arrive like thunder. It came in pieces: a printed appointment card, a bus pass log, a grainy laundromat camera, one frightened clerk, and the silence of a man who had seen more than he wanted to say. By the time those pieces fit together, I had already lost more than a bus ride. I had lost the small route that kept me myself. Before this happened, my life was not impressive, but it was mine. That is something younger people do not always understand. They look at an old man living alone and think independence means driving across the country, climbing ladders, managing a business, making big decisions with big consequences. At our age, independence becomes smaller. It becomes exact. For me, it was the number 14 bus. It ran from Cedar Ridge, where I lived in a one-bedroom flat above a closed shoe repair shop, down past the medical center, the library, the pharmacy, the grocery store, and the little post office where I had worked for 32 years. I no longer drove after my second cataract surgery. The doctor said I might be able to again, but I knew myself. Night glare frightened me. My left knee stiffened when I sat too long. Ruth had been the brave driver in our marriage anyway. She could reverse a station wagon between two brick walls and still have room to complain about the roses. Ruth had been gone 11 years by then. I still kept her blue umbrella in the hall stand, though the fabric had a tear near the spoke. Some things are not kept because they are useful. They are kept because throwing them out would feel like voting against your own life. The bus gave me rhythm after she died. Monday was groceries, Tuesday was clinic or library, Thursday was pharmacy, unless my blood pressure tablets were not ready. Saturday, if my knee was good, I rode past my stop and stayed on until the river, where I could sit with a takeaway coffee and watch gulls behave like unpaid actors. I knew the bus drivers by face, if not always by name. Some nodded, some did not. One used to wait an extra breath if he saw me coming along the pavement. Another closed the door while I was still 3 steps away, but I learned not to expect tenderness from everyone in uniform. A bus is not a church pew. It moves by schedule. Still, I believed in basic decency. If a passenger is at a marked stop, hand raised, during service hours, the bus should stop. That was not a political opinion. It was how a bus worked. Cedar Ridge was not a grand neighborhood. It had 2 hair salons, 1 laundromat, a pawn shop that changed its window display every month, and a row of old flats where people paid rent on time because late fees have a way of becoming hunger. The bus stop stood across from the laundromat, near a maple tree that dropped sticky little seeds on the pavement. The shelter had a cloudy plastic panel. Someone had scratched a heart into it years earlier. I used to rub the edge of that scratch with my thumb when I waited. You notice things when you wait alone often enough. The laundromat camera had a tiny red light above the door. The timetable box had 2 missing screws at the bottom. The bench dipped on the left side, so if you sat there with a grocery bag, the apples rolled toward your hip. On cold mornings, the sun hit the glass of the pharmacy window across the road and made it look, for about 3 minutes, as if the place were on fire. These were my landmarks. Not because they were beautiful, but because they told me where I belonged. Grace did not understand that at first. She lived almost 4 hours away with a husband who traveled for work and 2 children old enough to text me only when birthdays required it. She was not a bad daughter. I must say that clearly. She loved me in the modern way, efficiently, anxiously, through phone calls squeezed between meetings, through online grocery suggestions, through sentences that began with, "Dad." I just worry. Worry can sound like love. It can also sound like a door closing. After Ruth died, Grace wanted me to move nearer to her. I said no. She said I was being stubborn. I said, stubbornness is what people call independence when it inconveniences them. We both laughed then, but only because the sentence was true enough to hurt. I had small weaknesses, and I knew them. I forgot names sometimes. I once left my debit in the self-checkout machine and had to walk back red-faced, while a teenage employee waved it gently, as if returning a wounded bird. I wrote appointments on 3 calendars because 1 calendar was no longer enough. I had a temper when I was frightened, though I called it pride for many years. So when the bus passed me that morning, I did not immediately think I was a victim of anything. I thought perhaps I had stepped too far back. Perhaps the driver had not seen me. Perhaps the glare had caught his mirror. An old man must be careful about how quickly he accuses the world, because the world is already prepared to accuse him of being difficult. I checked my watch, 8:12. My clinic appointment was at 8:45. I could not walk it. The medical center sat nearly 3 miles away, and my knee had been swelling all week. I tried calling a taxi, but the line rang until it stopped ringing. I considered asking the laundromat attendant, then felt ashamed of needing a stranger. So I stood there, appointment card softening in my damp fingers, and waited for the next bus. The next bus was 28 minutes later. By then, I was late enough to be marked as missed. At the clinic desk, the receptionist did not scold me. That almost made it worse. She smiled, the way young people smile when they have already decided you are part of the problem. "We can reschedule you, Martin Hale. I was here as quick as the bus allowed. I understand." But she did not understand, not really. A missed clinic appointment is a small thing on paper. It becomes larger when you have arranged your tablets around it, when you have put on clean socks with effort, when you have practiced the questions you meant to ask, because you do not trust yourself to remember them in the room. The new appointment was 3 weeks away. On the ride home, the driver was different, a woman with silver rings on 3 fingers. I told her another bus had missed me. I said it lightly. She said I should call customer service. Then she added, without looking back, "They don't like complaints unless you have the bus number." I did not have the bus number. That small missing fact would become the first place people poked a hole in me. 2 days later, I went to the transit depot in person. I wish now I had called. I wish I had written first. I wish I had brought someone with me. But old pride is a stubborn animal. It tells you that if your legs still work and your voice still carries, you should handle your own affairs. The depot was a low brick building beside the maintenance yard, smelling of diesel, wet rubber, and floor cleaner. There was a plastic window with a half-moon opening where you spoke to staff. Behind it sat a woman with dark hair pinned up, reading from a screen while phones blinked around her. Her badge said Lena Ortiz. I remember the badge because I used to read name tags as a postal worker. Names mattered. If a person had a name, you treated them more carefully. At least that was how I had been raised. Lena Ortiz looked tired, but not unkind. I explained what had happened. I gave the date, the time, the stop, the route, and my missed appointment card. She typed while I spoke. "Do you have the vehicle number?" she asked. "No." I was busy being left behind. She paused. It was a small pause, but I felt it. A younger man could have said that and been considered witty. From me, it sounded sharp. "I understand," she said. "We can search by route and time, then do that." There it was. The edge in my voice, not shouting, not threatening, but edge. I was angry, and anger sits differently on an old face. It looks like proof. She asked whether I had been standing at the pole. I said yes. She asked whether I had signaled. I said yes. She asked whether any other passengers were present. I said no. Then she said, "The operator may have reported a safety concern." Safety concern? I'm not saying that happened. I'm saying sometimes if an operator feels unsafe, they are instructed not to stop. I laughed once. It came out harder than I intended. "Miss, I am 77 years old and I walk with a cane." What was I going to do, hijack the number 14 to the pharmacy? Lena Ortiz's eyes moved from my face to my cane. Not fearfully, carefully. That was the third warning. Though I did not see it yet. She printed a complaint form and told me I could write down my account. There was a narrow counter, no chair. My handwriting shook when I stood too long, so I leaned my cane against the wall and filled the form with one hand pressed flat to steady the paper. Halfway through, the cane slid and clattered to the floor. A mechanic in the hallway looked over. I bent too quickly, lost balance, and grabbed the counter. My shoulder hit the plastic partition. It made a loud crack. Not broken, just loud. Lena Ortiz stood. "Sir, please step back. I'm picking up my cane. Please step back from the window." I said, "I'm picking up my cane." I heard my voice then. Not dangerous, but not gentle either. A man from the back office came out. Big shoulders, gray tie, the kind of expression people use when they have been summoned to manage a situation rather than understand it. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. "No," I said. "There is a complaint here." He told me to lower my voice. I told him not to speak to me like a child. He asked if I needed assistance leaving. I said if he wanted me out, he could put that in writing. That sentence was a mistake. At my age, you can be right in substance and wrong in temperature. People remember the temperature. Lena Ortiz finished taking the form. Her fingers were careful when she pulled it from the tray. I saw something in her face, not judgment exactly. Unease. "We'll review it," she said. I went home believing the matter was unpleasant but ordinary. A missed stop, a complaint, a bruised bit of pride. I made tea, put the clinic card in the little basket by the phone, and told Ruth's photograph on the mantel that public services had gone downhill since people stopped wearing proper shoes. The next morning the bus slowed, then did not stop. This time I had stepped to the pole. I lifted my whole arm. The driver turned his head. Not much, but enough. I saw his profile. Close-cropped hair, square jaw, dark sunglasses, though the sky was gray. Keith Rowley. I did not know his name then, only his face. Later I would know more than I wanted to. At the time, I only knew the look of a man who had decided I was not a passenger, but a complication. The bus passed. The air rocked after it. A woman from my building was walking her little dog on the opposite pavement. She looked at me, then looked away quickly, as if she had witnessed a private embarrassment. That look hurt more than the bus. I waited for the next one. It stopped. The driver opened the door but kept one hand on the brake. "Are you Martin Hale?" he asked. My name, in a stranger's mouth standing at a bus door, felt like a warning notice. "Yes, you need to ride respectfully today, sir." "I always ride respectfully. I'm just telling you what dispatch said." People behind me shifted. I could feel their impatience at my back, though there were only two of them. I climbed on, tapped my pass, and sat in the priority seat, not because I wanted it, but because my knee had begun trembling. Ride respectfully. As if the bus had passed me because I had failed at manners. At the library, I tried to use the computer to look up the transit complaint policy. I could sort mail by zip code faster than most men could sort playing cards, but websites make me feel like a man trying to open a locked door with a spoon. The page kept asking me to accept cookies. I did not want cookies. I wanted the rules. A librarian showed me where to click. She was kind, but kindness can bruise when it arrives with the assumption that you do not know anything. She printed the passenger conduct policy for 10 cents a page. It said aggressive behavior toward operators or staff could result in service restrictions. Service restrictions. The words sat on the paper like a trap already built. I called customer service that afternoon. The recording said calls might be monitored for quality. I almost laughed. Quality had not been in attendance so far. The representative told me my complaint was under review and that an operator had filed an incident report. I asked what incident. She said she could not discuss personnel matters. I asked whether I was being refused service. She said no, but operators had discretion to bypass stops if there was a safety concern. There it was again, safety concern. "I am the concern?" I asked. "I didn't say that, sir." "No, but somebody did." She told me I would receive a written response. I did, 8 days later. The letter came in a white envelope with a transit logo in blue. I opened it at the kitchen table with the butter knife Ruth used to call the paper opener because I never used it on butter. The letter said my complaint had been reviewed. It said the operator reported that a passenger at Cedar Ridge had approached the vehicle in an agitated manner and later appeared at the depot, raised his voice, struck the service partition with an object, and refused staff directions. It said the transit authority remained committed to safe service for all riders and staff. It said my pass remained active, but future aggressive conduct might result in suspension. No one said I had missed a medical appointment. No one said the bus had not stopped. No one said my cane had fallen. They had taken a chain of ordinary human clumsiness and tied it into a noose. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope because when you are old, rage has to pass through the body slowly. It cannot be spent all at once. It becomes a pressure behind the eyes, a pain in the hands, a kettle you forget you boiled. That night Grace called. I had not told her yet. Parents hide things from adult children for the same reason children once hid broken cups from parents. Shame, fear, and the foolish hope that if you fix it quickly, nobody has to know. But the transit office had called my emergency contact. I had forgotten I listed Grace years earlier when Ruth was ill. The supervisor told her there had been an incident. "Dad," Grace said, "what happened at the bus station?" "Depot," I said. "It is not a station. Please don't correct me right now." That stung because she sounded tired before I even began. I told her the bus missed me. I told her I complained. I told her my cane fell. I told her they had turned it into something else. There was a silence. Not disbelief. Something worse. Calculation. "Did you raise your voice?" she asked. I raised the truth. "Dad." "What?" "Did you raise your voice?" I looked across the kitchen at Ruth's umbrella in the hall stand. The blue fabric hung like a small weather report from a life where someone would have believed me first and corrected me second. "Yes," I said, "a little." Grace exhaled. That little exhale became another witness against me. She said she would drive up on Saturday. She said we needed to talk about options. I asked what options. She mentioned ride services, grocery delivery, maybe a senior transport program, maybe moving closer to her just for a while. Just for a while is one of the most dangerous phrases spoken to old people. It sounds temporary. It often means the first box has already been packed in someone else's mind. I told her I did not need rescuing. She said I was being defensive. I said anyone accused falsely has a right to defend himself. She said she was on my side, and I believed her. But being on someone's side is not the same as standing where they stand. Over the next 2 weeks, the number 14 became unreliable only for me. That sounds paranoid when I say it, and I know how it sounds. One bus stopped, another did not. One driver lowered the ramp, though I had not asked, then watched me as if expecting trouble. Another told me I should keep things calm today. At the pharmacy, the young man behind the counter asked whether I wanted my refills transferred to a delivery service. "Who told you I needed delivery?" I asked. "No one. We just offer it." But his eyes moved to my cane, then to the line of people behind me. At the grocery store, a neighbor from the building said, "I hear you had a bit of a scare with the bus people." "With them," I said. "Not from me." "Of course," she said. "It's just, drivers have a hard job. So do old men," I wanted to say. Instead, I bought milk, potatoes, tea, and a tin of peaches I did not need because Ruth used to like them. I carried the bags home in 2 trips because I refused to call Grace. Pride is expensive in small coins. By the end of the month, I had missed 1 clinic appointment, canceled a dental cleaning, paid for 3 taxis, and stopped going to the library because I could not bear another public moment at the bus door. My world shrank to what my knee could handle. The pharmacy delivery came in a white paper bag left by my door. Efficient, humiliating. Grace arrived on a Saturday morning with a fold-out folder and the strained cheerfulness of a woman trying not to frighten her father while frightening herself. She brought soup. She brought brochures. She brought a tablet computer and said there were apps now where drivers could pick me up at the curb. I told her I did not want strangers with cars. She said buses were strangers with larger cars. I told her not to be clever. She cried then, not loudly, just enough to make me feel cruel. "I'm scared," she said. "So am I said, but we were scared of different things." She was scared I would fall, argue, get stranded, become one of those stories adult children tell in hushed voices. I was scared that one wrong word in a transit file had given everybody permission to treat me as a problem to be managed. Grace asked to see the letter. I gave it to her. She read it twice. Her face changed in the small ways daughters do not know fathers can still read. At first she frowned at the wording. Then she paused at raised his voice. Then at struck the service partition. Then at future aggressive conduct. "Dad," she said gently, "did your cane hit the window?" It fell. I grabbed the counter. My shoulder hit the partition, but something did hit it. I felt heat rise in my neck. "This is how they get you," I said. "They take the smallest true thing and build a house on it." She put the letter down. "I'm not saying you're lying. No, you're just measuring which parts are easiest to doubt." That was unfair. I knew it as soon as I said it. But hurt people often throw their pain, toward the nearest person willing to stay in the room. Grace looked at me with wet eyes and said, "I drove 4 hours because I'm trying to help." I did not ask to be helped into a smaller life. She left that afternoon earlier than planned. She kissed my cheek before she went, but her mouth barely touched me. On the kitchen table she left the brochures. One had a smiling gray-haired couple standing in front of a retirement community garden, as if aging were just a matter of choosing the right flowers. I nearly threw them away. Instead, I put them in the same basket as the transit letter. By then, I had begun keeping notes. Not because I expected a grand investigation, because I was afraid of my own memory. I bought a small red notebook from the corner shop and wrote dates, times, bus numbers when I could see them, whether the bus stopped, what the driver said, what I paid for taxis, what appointment I missed, what I felt afterward if the feeling seemed relevant. The first pages were messy. On one entry I wrote Wednesday when it had been Thursday. On another I wrote 8:17, then crossed it out because the kitchen clock had been slow. Those mistakes frightened me. I stared at them too long. There is a particular terror in old age that younger people cannot rehearse. It is not simply forgetting. Everyone forgets. It is finding a mistake in your own handwriting while someone else has already called you unreliable. Suddenly, the mistake looks like their witness. I almost stopped writing. Then I remembered Ruth balancing the household accounts every Sunday night. She used to say, "If the numbers don't love you, at least they don't flatter you." So I kept writing. Badly sometimes, but I kept writing. The next piece came by accident, though not by miracle. I had gone to the depot again, calmer this time, with my notebook, the letter, and a request I had written out so I would not have to trust my voice. I asked for the process to appeal the passenger conduct note. I asked whether GPS records or vehicle camera records were preserved. I asked for any records connected to the date and time of the missed stop. Lena Ortiz was at the window again. When she saw me, something crossed her face. Not fear. Guilt, perhaps, or recognition. "I'm here to ask in writing," I said before she could speak. "I will keep my voice low." Her cheeks colored. "You can submit that," she said. I slid the paper through the opening. She read it. "I can't promise what they'll release. I'm not asking you to break rules. I know." She looked toward the back office. The gray-tie supervisor was not there. The hallway was empty except for a mechanic carrying a clipboard. "Martin Hale," she said quietly. "Keep copies of everything you give them." It was not much. But it was the first sentence anyone inside that building had spoken as if I were still a person with a future. I asked whether I could have a date-stamped copy of my request. She hesitated, then stamped it received and photocopied it. Her hand shook a little when she passed it back. That small purple date stamp did not prove I was right. It proved I had asked. Some days that is the beginning of not being erased. Outside the depot, I sat on the low wall because my knee had locked. I watched buses pull in and out of the yard. Men and women in uniforms crossed the lot with lunch bags, keys, paper cups. Ordinary people, most of them. That is the trouble with injustice. It is often carried out by ordinary people who need to get through a shift. I did not hate them. I hated how easily a system could borrow their tiredness and turn it into my disappearance. 2 weeks passed before the transit authority responded. The letter said, vehicle video was retained only for a limited period and might no longer be available unless an incident had been formally preserved. It said GPS information was operational data, not routinely released to passengers. It said the incident report stood pending internal review. It said I could attend a conduct review meeting if I wished, as if I had wished for any of this. The meeting date was set for a Tuesday at 10. I had to pay for a taxi to get there because I no longer trusted the number 14 to carry me to a meeting about why I no longer trusted the number 14. The taxi cost $18 each way. I wrote it in the red notebook and underlined it twice, not because money was the worst part, because money has a way of making humiliation measurable. Before the meeting, I went to the laundromat across from Cedar Ridge. I had not been inside in years. Ruth and I had owned a washer, and after she died, I still used the old one until it rattled like a train. The laundromat smelled of soap powder and hot metal. A young attendant sat behind a counter watching a show on her phone. I asked whether the camera outside recorded the street. She said probably, but the owner handled that. I asked whether footage from 3 weeks earlier would still exist. She shrugged. Maybe 30 days, maybe not. My heart knocked once. I wrote a note for the owner with my name, phone number, date, and approximate time. I did not say I needed proof. I wrote that I was trying to confirm whether a bus had passed the stop without stopping. I paid for a small box of dryer sheets I did not need, so my visit would not feel like begging. No one called for 5 days. On the 6th day, I went back. The owner was there, a broad man with reading glasses hanging on a cord. I will not name him because he did not become a hero, and not everyone who does one decent thing needs to be recruited into a story. He told me the footage was grainy, and the camera faced the entrance, not the bus stop. But you can see the road edge, he said. He showed me on a monitor behind the counter. There I was, a small brown shape near the pole. There was the bus passing through the upper corner of the image, partly blocked by a delivery van. You could not see the driver's face. You could not hear anything. You could not even say with certainty how far my arm lifted. But you could see the bus did not pull toward the curb. The owner would not give me a copy without a formal request. He did allow me to watch it twice and write down the timestamp printed in the corner. 8:11:37. He said, "Looks like it went by." Then he glanced toward the washers and added, "I don't want trouble with the bus company. My wife takes that route." There it was, the cowardice of ordinary survival. I could not even blame him fully. The footage proved something, but not enough. It proved the bus had passed. It did not prove I had signaled clearly. It did not prove the driver saw me. It did not erase the depot incident. It was a sliver of truth, thin enough for someone determined to bend it. Still, when I left the laundromat, the pavement looked different. Not friendly, but less insane. I was not inventing the morning. That night I called Grace and told her about the footage. She sounded relieved for about 10 seconds. Then she said, "Can you get a copy?" "Not yet." "Then be careful, Dad. Don't go accusing anyone until you have it." There was love in that sentence. There was also fear of me embarrassing myself. I heard both. "I am not accusing," I said. "I am collecting what happened." "Okay." But her okay was the kind people give when they are not convinced, only tired. The conduct review meeting was held in a room with beige walls and a clock that ticked too loudly. The gray tie supervisor sat at one end. Lena Ortiz sat along the side with a folder. Keith Rowley sat near the door, arms crossed. I knew his name by then, because the incident report summary, finally sent to me, listed him as the operator who had reported the initial stop concern and later identified me at the depot. Keith Rowley was younger than me by 20 years, maybe more. Not young, exactly. Middle-aged, solid, with the tight look of a man who had learned to win arguments by seeming calmer than the person he injured. He wore his uniform perfectly. His boots were polished. I remember resenting the shine. The supervisor explained that the meeting was informal. That meant No one was under oath. No decisions would be final that day. And yet everything said could be used to decide whether I remained a rider in good standing. Informal, I have found, often means the rules matter only when they help the room. They let Keith Rowley speak first, he said. Cedar Ridge was a known difficult stop because passengers often stood back from the pole. He said on the morning in question he did not see a clear signal. He said later, at the depot, he observed me acting agitated towards staff. He said operators had been advised to exercise caution. Exercise caution, not avoid me, not punish me. Exercise caution. He had a gift for words that put gloves on the hand, doing the pushing. When it was my turn, I kept my written notes in front of me. I said I had been at the pole. I said I had raised my hand. I said my clinic card showed I had reason to be there. I said the laundromat camera timestamps suggested the bus did not pull in. I said my cane had fallen at the depot, and any sound against the partition had been accidental. The supervisor asked whether I denied raising my voice. I looked at Lena Ortiz. She looked down. No, I said. I raised my voice. I did not threaten anyone. Keith Rowley shifted in his chair, just a little. The supervisor thanked me for my honesty, which is sometimes what people say before they use honesty against you. He asked whether I understood that staff safety was a priority. I said yes. He asked whether I understood that operators must make quick judgments. I said yes. He asked whether I would agree to a passenger behavior plan, requiring respectful communication with operators and staff. A behavior plan. At 77, after 32 years delivering pension checks through snow, sympathy cards after funerals, and parcels to people who never once learned my name, I was being offered a behavior plan because a bus had not stopped. My mouth went dry. I nearly signed it. That is something I have never told Grace. I nearly signed because the room was warm, because my knee hurt, because Keith Rowley looked calm, because I was tired of being the old man everyone had to handle. I thought if I signed, perhaps the buses would stop again. Perhaps I could get back to the library. Perhaps the word aggressive would fade if I behaved quietly enough. Then I saw Lena Ortiz's hand move. She did not speak. She only turned a page in her folder, and for a second I saw the corner of my stamped written request clipped inside, the purple date stamp, the proof that I had asked for records. It reminded me of something small but important. If I signed a behavior plan before the review was finished, the story would begin with my misconduct, not with the missed stop. I put the pen down. I will agree to be respectful, I said. I will not agree to a paper that makes your version true before you have checked mine. The room changed then. Not dramatically. No one gasped, but the supervisor's face cooled. Keith Rowley uncrossed his arms. Lena Ortiz still looked at the table. The meeting ended without resolution. Outside, I stood under the depot awning while rain began to mark the pavement. The taxi was late. My leg ached. I had paid $36 to sit in a room where refusing to confess felt like causing trouble. That was the day I understood how people get erased politely. First they ask you to be reasonable. Then they define reasonable as accepting their paperwork. The next month was the hardest, not because of one large blow, but because of many small ones. The bus stopped more often after the meeting, but not normally. Drivers watched me. One asked where I was going before I boarded. Another told a passenger, "Let him sit first," in a tone that made me sound breakable and dangerous at the same time. At the library, I saw two regulars lower their voices when I walked past the newspapers. At the pharmacy, the delivery option was offered again. Grace called every evening for a while, then every other evening. I knew she was tired. I was tired of hearing my own case, too. There is a point where even the wronged person becomes bored by the injustice, which is dangerous because boredom looks like surrender. I almost surrendered when the second transit letter arrived. It said the authority found insufficient evidence that the operator had failed to follow policy. It said my conduct at the depot had been documented by staff. It said, in light of my age and continued need for service, they would not suspend my pass at that time, provided there were no further incidents, in light of my age. They had spared me like a dog, not worth kicking. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time with that letter in front of me. The room grew darker. I did not turn on the lamp. Across the hall, Ruth's umbrella stood in the shadows. I imagined her saying, "Martin Hale, eat something." She had been practical like that. When the world turned cruel, Ruth believed in soup. I ate a piece of toast standing at the sink. Then I took the red notebook and wrote one sentence. If I stop here, this becomes my record. That sentence frightened me more than anything. Records outlive mood. They outlive explanation. They sit in systems long after the people who made them have moved on. A young clerk searching my name in a year would not see my damp appointment card, my fallen cane, the bus passing the curb, my daughter's worried voice, or the evenings I sat too ashamed to go out. They would see aggressive passenger. I called Lena Ortiz the next morning. I did not expect her to answer directly, but she did. Transit office, this is Lena Ortiz. This is Martin Hale. A pause. Yes, Martin Hale. I received the review letter. I'm sorry. It came out before she could stop it. That apology was not official. It had no weight. But it told me something in the room had not sat right with her. I asked whether there was any way to request preservation or review of route data more formally. She said I could send a written appeal to the customer services manager and include any outside evidence. She said they might not release internal GPS data to me, but a manager could review it. She said camera footage was often overwritten unless flagged, but if an incident report had been made, related footage might have been stored. Was it flagged? I asked. I can't tell you that. Can you tell me what to ask? Another pause. Ask them to confirm whether any vehicle video, GPS, dispatch notes, or operator messages were preserved for both the missed stop time and the depot visit. Ask in writing. Why both? Because the file is treating them like one incident. There it was, the hinge. They had tied the missed stop and the depot argument together so tightly that if one part looked bad for me, the other part could be ignored. If the depot incident made me aggressive, then perhaps the missed stop was justified. If the missed stop was justified, then my anger at the depot proved the concern. A circle, very neat, very hard to escape. I thanked her. She said, "Martin Hale, I can't be involved beyond process. I know, and you should be careful with phone calls. Write things down. I am." After we hung up, I wrote her words in the notebook. Not her private apology. That felt unfair. Just the process. Vehicle video, GPS, dispatch notes, operator messages, missed stop, depot visit. I underlined both. The appeal took me 3 afternoons to draft. My handwriting was too uneven, so I used the library computer. The librarian helped me save the document, but I typed the words myself. I kept it factual. I did not say Keith Rowley was lying. I said the records might show whether the vehicle pulled to the curb, whether the operator entered any safety report, before or after passing Cedar Ridge, and whether my conduct at the depot had been described accurately. I attached copies, the clinic appointment card, taxi receipts, the complaint form, the purple stamped request, my red notebook pages, and a note from the laundromat owner saying footage appeared to show a Route 14 vehicle passing the stop at 8:11 without pulling to the curb. though the camera angle did not show all details. That note took 2 visits and 1 uncomfortable conversation. The owner did not want his name in it. I told him he could simply describe what the footage showed. He said he did not want to be dragged into anything. I said I had already been dragged. He looked at me then, not with courage exactly, but with the tired recognition of a man who knew he was choosing comfort over decency. He wrote the note on plain paper and signed only with the laundromat business name. It was imperfect. Most useful things are. I mailed the appeal certified because the retired postal worker in me trusted receipts more than promises. The clerk at the post office recognized me. She had been hired after I retired, but old workers leave traces. She said, "Haven't seen you in a while." Been harder getting around. Bus trouble? I looked at her. She looked away. So the story had traveled there too. I wanted to ask what she had heard. Instead, I paid for the mailing and took the receipt. Sometimes, preserving dignity means not letting people see where they have wounded you. 3 weeks later, a customer services manager called. She did not give me warm words. I appreciated that. Warm words had done enough damage. She said my appeal had raised questions requiring additional review. She said vehicle GPS records showed Route 14 was running 4 minutes ahead of schedule at Cedar Ridge on the morning in question and did not record a full stop at the designated zone. She said the operator had entered a passenger standing away from stop, no safe boarding note after the fact. After the fact. I wrote those words so hard the pen tore the paper. She said this did not automatically prove a policy violation because operators had discretion. She said the depot incident was still documented separately. She said they were reviewing whether the passenger conduct alert had been proportionate. Proportionate is another word that wears gloves. I asked whether the alert was why drivers had been treating me differently. She said alerts were meant to inform operators of potential safety issues. That is a yes wearing a hat, I said. She did not laugh. I did not blame her. She offered a second meeting. I said I would attend if I could bring my daughter by phone. Grace could not travel that week, but she joined by speaker. Before the meeting, she called me privately. "Dad," she said, "I read everything you sent. And I'm sorry I doubted parts of it. There are apologies that heal. There are apologies that arrive too early and ask for celebration." Grace's apology was neither. It was small, tired, and ashamed. I could accept it because she did not ask me to make her feel better. I doubted parts of it too, I said. That was true. The second meeting was smaller. The gray tie supervisor was not there. The customer services manager led it. Lena Ortiz sat with a notepad. Keith Rowley attended, but his arms were not crossed this time. The manager summarized the new information. GPS, no full stop at Cedar Ridge. Schedule, bus early. Operator note, entered after the missed stop time. Depot report. Staff described raised voice and contact with partition, but no damage, no threat recorded, no police or security involvement. Passenger conduct alert, issued broadly to operators for caution. Each fact was small. Together they changed the weather in the room. Keith Rowley said the GPS did not show whether he had made a safety judgment. He said early running happened because of traffic gaps. He said he remembered a passenger standing back from the pole. He said when he later saw me at the depot, my behavior confirmed his concern. There it was again, the circle. The manager asked Lena Ortiz to read her note from the depot day. Lena Ortiz's throat moved. She read carefully. Passenger upset about missed stop. Cane fell. Passenger leaned forward after retrieving cane. Voice raised. Staff requested passenger step back. No direct threat heard. No direct threat heard. It was not a song. It did not erase my sharpness. It did not make me gentle. But it cut one bar from the cage. Keith Rowley looked at Lena Ortiz then, not angrily. Betrayed, perhaps. People who rely on silence often feel betrayed when someone simply reads what they wrote. The manager asked whether anyone had documented me striking the partition with an object. Lena Ortiz said, "The sound was from the cane falling and the customer steadying himself." "That was my understanding." Keith Rowley said, "That's not how it looked from the hallway." "You were in the hallway?" the manager asked. He paused. That pause did more than any speech could have done. In his original report, Keith Rowley had written that he observed my behavior at the service window. Now, under the pressure of dates and notes and positions in a room, the word observed began to shrink. He said he had come in after hearing the commotion. "After," Grace said from the phone, her voice was steady. My daughter, who had once measured my story for cracks, had found one in his. No one declared victory. No one apologized. The manager said they would review the record and respond in writing. I left with my body shaking so badly I had to sit in the lobby. Lena Ortiz passed once with a stack of papers. She did not stop. She only placed a cup of water on the table beside me and continued walking. That was all she could do. That was enough for that moment. The written response came 12 days later. I opened it standing in the hall because I could not wait to reach the kitchen. The transit authority acknowledged that the Route 14 vehicle had not made a recorded stop at Cedar Ridge at the scheduled time and had been running ahead of schedule. It acknowledged that the passenger conduct alert issued under my name had been broader than warranted by the documented facts. It said the alert would be removed and replaced with a note that I had filed a missed stop complaint and should receive normal service. It said staff would receive a reminder on documenting incidents accurately and on distinguishing customer complaints from safety threats. Then came the sentence I read again and again. The record does not support classifying Martin Hale as an aggressive passenger. Dry, cold, bureaucratic, beautiful. I sat down on the stairs halfway between my flat and the street. The paper trembled in my hands. I did not cry. I thought I might, but tears did not come. What came instead was a long breath I seemed to have been holding for months. The letter also offered reimbursement for documented taxi fares related to missed or disputed service, subject to review. Subject to review, of course. The world was not suddenly generous. In the end, they reimbursed 2 taxis, not all 3. They did not pay for the missed clinic appointment because there had been no fee. They did not pay for the sleep I lost, the groceries I skipped, the library days gone, the way neighbors looked at me, or the way Grace and I spoke carefully now around the word help. Keith Rowley was moved off the number 14 for a while. Later, I heard he had taken a supervisory driving role on another route. No one announced discipline. No one owed me the details, they said. Perhaps that was true. Perhaps it was another glove. The gray tie supervisor stopped appearing at the front office. Lena Ortiz told me months later, only in general terms, that procedures had changed. Operators now had to specify whether a safety alert was based on direct threat, observed behavior, or customer dispute, a small change. Not justice exactly. But maybe a bolt tightened before the next old man leaned too hard on a counter. Walter Pike came into the story late, though he had been there early. I knew Walter Pike from the bus stop, not well. He was one of those men who wore a cap in all weather and carried folded newspapers, as if the world still depended on print. He had been across the road, the morning after my depot complaint, the morning the drivers slowed and passed. I remembered him because he looked down when it happened. After the letter cleared my name, Walter Pike knocked on my door. He stood in the hallway, turning his cap in his hands. "I should have said something," he said. I did not invite him in right away. That is not flattering, but it is true. He told me his nephew worked maintenance at the transit yard, not a powerful job, just a job. Walter Pike had worried that if he got involved, the boy might suffer for it. He had seen buses pass me more than once. He had heard drivers mention an alert. He had not known what to do. So he did what many people do when doing the right thing has a price. Nothing. "I'm sorry, Martin Hale," he said. "I wanted to be noble. I wanted to say I understood." In a way, I did. Fear makes small cowards of people who are not villains. But understanding is not the same as absolution. "You could have written an anonymous note," I said. He looked down, "I know." I let him stand with that, not to punish him, because some silences need to be felt by the person who made them. Then I stepped aside and let him in for tea. We did not become close friends. Life is not so tidy. We nodded at the stop after that. Sometimes we spoke about weather, which is the language of men who have too much else to say and no safe place to put it. Once, months later, he told another passenger, "This stop gets skipped sometimes. Write down the time." That was his apology, continuing in public, small as it was. Grace and I changed too, not in the way films would prefer. She did not suddenly understand everything about old age. I did not suddenly become easy. But after the transit letter, she stopped saying options as if the word itself were harmless. She began asking, "What do you want to keep doing yourself, and what do you want help with?" That question saved us more than either of us admitted. I let her set up grocery delivery for heavy items only. Detergent, cat litter for the neighbor's cat when I watched him, big bags of rice. I kept buying my own tea, bread, apples, and tinned peaches. She added her name to a folder of emergency contacts, but not to my bank account. I showed her where the clinic letters were kept. She stopped touching the retirement brochures. One evening she said, "I thought helping meant making things safer." I said, "Sometimes it does, and sometimes it means asking what safety will cost." We left it there. That was enough wisdom for one phone call. The first day, I rode the number 14 after the record was corrected. I wore my brown coat, though it was too warm. I had the transit letter folded in my inside pocket. I hated that I needed it. I loved that I had it. Both things can be true. The bus came at 8:14. It was not Keith Rowley. The driver pulled to the curb, opened the door, and said, "Morning." Just that. No apology, no speech, no special treatment. I tapped my pass and took the priority seat because my knee hurt, not because anyone had instructed me to. I watched Cedar Ridge slide past the window. Laundromat, pawn shop, maple tree, cracked bench, cloudy shelter panel with the scratched heart. The world looked ordinary. That was what nearly broke me. When something terrible has made your life strange, ordinary can feel like both mercy and insult. The bus simply moved on. People checked phones. A woman coughed into a tissue. A child pressed his forehead to the glass. No one knew the months I had spent trying to prove I was not the word someone typed into a file. At the medical center, I arrived 20 minutes early. I sat in the waiting room with my questions written clearly on a card. When the nurse called my name, I stood slowly. She spoke to me, not over me. I answered, not perfectly, but well enough. That evening, I placed the transit letter in a blue folder, labeled Muti 14. I put it in the bottom drawer of the kitchen cabinet, beside Ruth's old household accounts. I did not frame it. I did not show it around. A corrected record is not a trophy. It is a splint. You use it while the bone remembers where it was broken. Time passed, as it does, whether or not you are ready to forgive it. The bus stop was repaired the following spring. New screws in the timetable box, a fresh bench that did not dip on the left side. For a week, the plastic shelter smelled faintly of glue. Someone from transit came and adjusted the pole, so the route number faced the road more clearly. They did not say it was because of me. I did not need them to say it. Still, I never stood in quite the same way again. I moved closer to the pole. I raised my hand earlier. I watched the driver's face. I wrote down the bus number if anything felt wrong, not because I lived in fear, but because innocence is not the same as peace. Once you learn how easily a word can be attached to your name, you respect paper differently. One wet morning, nearly a year after the first missed stop, a woman about my age stood beside me at Cedar Ridge. She had a walker with tennis balls on the front legs and a hospital envelope tucked under the seat. When the bus appeared, she lifted her hand too late. The driver stopped but sharply and opened the door with impatience already in his shoulders. "Need to be closer to the sign," he said. The woman flushed. "I'm sorry," she murmured. I felt something old move in my chest. Not rage exactly. Memory with its coat on. "She was at the stop," I said. The driver looked at me. I kept my voice level. I had learned the cost of temperature. "She was at the stop," I repeated, and she signaled. For a second, no one moved. Then the driver lowered the step, and the woman boarded. She thanked him. Then quieter, she thanked me. I wanted to say something grand, something about dignity, records, older people, the way systems make ghosts of us if no one writes things down. But grand speeches are for people who have not had to live through the paperwork afterward. So I only said, "Keep your appointment card." She looked puzzled. "You may never need it," I said, "but keep it." She nodded and sat 2 rows behind me. The bus pulled away. I watched the laundromat camera vanish from the window, then the maple tree, then the cracked stretch of pavement that had once made me invisible. I thought of Keith Rowley, wherever he was driving now. I thought of Lena Ortiz, who had not saved me but had left one door unlatched. I thought of Walter Pike and his cap, Grace and her brochures, Ruth and her blue umbrella, waiting in my hallway like weather from another life. I had not won back everything. The library did not feel as easy as before. Some neighbors still spoke to me with an extra softness that meant they remembered the rumor more than the correction. Grace still worried, and I still bristled. I still checked my notebook when I doubted myself. I still had mornings when one forgotten word made me cold with fear, but my name no longer carried that false alert. The bus stopped, and sometimes at our age that is not a small thing. If you have ever been treated as difficult when you were only trying to be heard, tell me this. At what point does help or safety stop protecting an older person and start erasing them?